Hi guys, Olive here. Here today with the next installment in my ongoing series of videos all about the 90s PBS Kids TV show, Wishbone. In case you've never seen the show, it was a, most of the time, half-hour television show on PBS Kids, and every single episode was split between two different storylines. The first storyline was always an adaptation of a canonical work. So most of the time that was a book, but it could also be a folk tale, a short story, a play, things of that nature. But then the second storyline took place in the modern day, aka the 1990s, when this television show was made, and that storyline focused on a family living in Texas with their pet Jack Russell Terrier Wishbone, and that modern day storyline always had something to do with the literary adaptation. In these videos I do here on my channel, what I do is look at a single episode of Wishbone and I compare it against the work of literature that they chose to take on. I look at what they chose to include and what they chose to exclude, and I speculate on why they may have made those decisions. I try to see if they were faithful to the work, whether or not they did it justice. Those can sometimes be two entirely different things. I look to see if there was any kind of moral message from the work of literature that they tried to communicate to the very young audience using the modern day storyline. And at the end of the day, I'm looking to see whether it made for an entertaining half hour of television. In today's video, though, I'll be looking at an episode of Wishbone that's longer than a half hour. This is actually one of only two double episodes of Wishbone, meaning hour-long episodes of Wishbone. And this one is special because it's the season 2 opener. This was the season 2 premiere episode, and it takes on Washington Irving's classic spooky tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, in an episode titled The Legend of Creepy Callers. So let's take a look. What's the story, Wishbone?
What's the story, Wishbone? What's this you're dreaming of?
When this episode opens, things are looking mighty spooky in Oakdale, Texas. It's late October, and it's beginning to look a lot like Halloween. When Joe gets home from his first day of basketball practice, he's upset with Wishbone since Wishbone didn't come to his basketball practice. Apparently, Wishbone always comes to his basketball practices, and Joe is superstitious about it now. He doesn't want to jinx the season, and he thinks that might have something to do with it. In fact, Joe is very focused on avoiding bad luck. I mean, he's wearing his lucky socks, which are very stinky now since apparently he doesn't wash them, and he also wants to start off the basketball season with a new ball. Before going to the sports store, Joe and Wishbone play a different kind of ball, but when Joe throws a long one, it goes on the grounds of a scary-looking house, which is the old Murphy place, according to Joe, leading Wishbone to introduce The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Wishbone sets the scene of the story of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, showing the autumnal town of Sleepy Hollow and talking about its myths, like the one about a soldier who roams the town in search of his missing head. This apparition is also known as the Headless Horseman. Wishbone also introduces another important character who he himself is playing in the literary adaptation, schoolteacher Ichabod Crane. Joe and Wishbone make it to the sports store finally to get Joe that new ball, and Wishbone is in tennis ball heaven. As Joe is searching for a new basketball, he meets the very friendly owner of the store, who invites Joe to participate in the town scavenger hunt he's organizing for Halloween. The store owner goes to sign Joe up for the scavenger hunt, but it turns out that Joe's friend Samantha, Sam as they call her, had already signed Joe up to be on her team. Back in the book adaptation, Ichabod Crane meets the beautiful and rich Katrina Van Tassel, who is the daughter of a wealthy Dutch farmer. The two start to spend some time together, and Ichabod seems mighty interested in her, especially after seeing how comfortable a home she has. Back in Texas, Joe is really on the fence about wanting to go to this scavenger hunt. It turns out he has a long history of having bad luck on Halloween, and he's afraid it's going to happen again this year, especially since a black cat crossed his path earlier that day. He talks to his mom about not wanting to go that evening, but she manages to talk him into it. Later that night, everyone shows up to the scavenger hunt in their fun costumes, including, surprisingly, the town bully DeMont. who is in a crappy costume. No surprises there. He is just too cool for that. I was actually surprised he showed up until I heard that, one, he needs to chaperone his little cousin Jimmy, and two, the prize for the scavenger hunt is a $100 gift certificate to the sports store. And well, Demont is interested in that part. Ichabod is doing some competing in his storyline as well, but he is competing for the affections of the lovely Katrina. But it turns out that Ichabod has a rival suitor. There is a man by the name of Brom Bones who is also interested in Katrina. Ichabod manages to chase Brom off the first time we meet him in that storyline, but we already get the sense that that's not the last we've seen of Brom Bones. The kids are busy trying to figure out the clues for the scavenger hunt back in the modern day storyline, and they end up at Joe's neighbor Wanda's house. She's outside telling fortunes, but inside, her house has been entirely transformed. The kids solve the next clue with Demont lying in wait. He wants to win that gift certificate, and he's not above cheating. He gets ahead of them by one clue, by cheating, and so the pressure is on. In the other storyline, while Ichabod is actively courting Katrina, Brom Bones and another townsperson tell him to come quick. There's a really strange scene at the schoolhouse that he needs to see. When Ichabod gets there, the school is a mess, and he becomes convinced that some kind of a ghost was responsible for it. So later on in the storyline, when he's at a party held by the Van Tassel family, when everybody's talking and the subject of the Headless Horseman comes up, he becomes convinced that they're going to see that ghost very shortly. Ichabod Crane accidentally stays too late at that party. He stays there past midnight, and he's more than a little afraid that he's going to encounter the Headless Horseman on his walk home. Back in the modern day storyline, the kids are staring fear in the face as well, because for the next clue, they have to go into the haunted Murphy place, and Joe does not want to go in there. It turns out he has a history with this place. It gave him quite the fright as a younger kid, but Wishbone chases the black cat I spoke about earlier into the house, finally forcing Joe to go inside, and no doubt about it, it's really creepy in there. And then, when Ichabod Crane is walking home from the Van Tassels, he starts to hear noises. And then he starts being pursued by none other than the Headless Horseman. It's unclear how Crane fares in the pursuit, but it doesn't look great by the end. The kids are trying to solve the puzzle inside of the old Murphy place when Demont, or as Wishbone fittingly calls him, Demonster, tries to trap each member of our main squad inside of closets in this creepy house, trying to prevent them from solving the puzzle and winning the gift certificate. But Wishbone, good old Wishbone, he gets the best of Demont, traps him inside of a closet. Our kids are able to find the answer to the puzzle and win the gift certificates, leading Joe to believe that, hey, it might have been his lucky day after all. Ichabod Crane, however, didn't have the same luck as Joe. He disappeared the night that he faced the Headless Horseman, and Brom Bones, well, we're led to believe he might have had something to do with it. Okay, so let's talk about this episode of Wishbone. I'll just come out and say right away that I loved this episode. It really made me wish that all of the episodes of Wishbone were an hour long as opposed to a half hour. I feel like we have so much more time to be with the characters in the modern day storyline, and we have so much more time to actually see the content from whatever work they chose to take on. I think one of the reasons why I liked this episode so much is that I really feel like they did the story justice. I mean, you would hope so. They have double the amount of time and they're covering a short story as opposed to a whole book. So you would hope so, and they definitely came through on that. So that makes me really happy. They did change a few things, more just like they left a few things out and kind of led the audience in one direction. But I'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about the similarities between the story and the episode first. The number one thing I wanted to highlight is the fact that Wishbone and Ichabod Crane share a character trait that they made a really good choice in emphasizing in this episode. They're both very food motivated. They both can eat. I think it's the reason why Wishbone was so perfect playing Ichabod Crane in this adaptation, because throughout this entire series, the Wishbone series, Wishbone Wishbone is a very food-motivated animal. So you got to see Ichabod Crane be really into food and then Wishbone be really into food. It was just such a perfect parallel. But Ichabod Crane is also a really big fan of ghost stories, and I feel like that's something they definitely emphasized. I feel like more in the episode than Irving did in the story. And I know they did it for a reason. They did it to let the audience know that even if something might not be supernatural, Ichabod Crane might believe it's supernatural because he reads all of these stories. That character trait definitely serves their story needs later on down the line. In terms of things they left out from this episode that were a part of the short story, they definitely made the choice not to mention that Ichabod doesn't like his job. And he also doesn't particularly like kids. He's looking to get out of his job, hence why he's pursuing Katrina. He's attracted to not just her, but her wealth. He doesn't want to continue being a school teacher. And it makes sense why they left that out of a children's television show. I'm not sure any kid watching this would like Ichabod Crane if they found out, hey, he actually hates kids. So probably a good choice on the writer's part. But they also chose to leave out another kind of awkward thing from the story, and that's the age difference between Ichabod and Katrina. Katrina is 18 years old, and Ichabod, I don't know if we're told exactly how old he is, but he's older than 18. I wouldn't be surprised if he was at least a double Katrina's age. But the major difference between the adaptation in this episode and the story itself is one major thing that the episode left out, and that's the fact that Katrina actually rejected Ichabod Crane on the night of the party. She turns him down. He declares his intentions, he declares his affections, and she says no. So he's leaving the party after having been rejected, and he goes home on horseback. And those are two really important things, because in the story, when he's being pursued by the Headless Horseman, it's more of a chase than it is in the episode. In the episode, it's kind of more of a trampling. And also, the rejection in the story instills some doubt in the mind of the reader, because there are a few different options of what could have happened to Ichabod Crane after his meeting with the Headless Horseman. He could have been killed. He could have just disappeared. Or he could have left town because he was embarrassed because everyone knew that he was pursuing Katrina and she turned him down. So that embarrassment could have led him to leave the town, especially because he was such a man about town. He knew everybody. So he would definitely be hearing about it. So that gives a different avenue of what could have happened to Ichabod that the episode doesn't present. The show's version of the story wants to remove any uncertainty. They want you to believe that Brom Bones was responsible. He was the one who tried to scare Ichabod, more likely tried to kill him, which is a little bit dark, but okay. I understand why they didn't want to have too many different competing theories going on in an episode of Wishbone, but definitely in the story itself, there are a lot more theories as to what could have happened to Ichabod. I especially think they wanted the audience to believe that one theory because they removed that rejection scene. They would have had time to include it. It wouldn't have taken very long. But I think if you don't include that, then Ichabod Crane is still seen as competition for Brom Bones, meaning that Brom Bones has a motive for wanting to get rid of Ichabod, whereas in the story, he might have had a motive, he might not have. Again, I think they made that choice to remove any kind of ambiguity for the kids. They wanted to make it more straightforward, easier to understand, and I'm honestly fine with that. I don't have any complaints about the adaptation storyline, and I don't have any complaints about the modern storyline either. I really liked that both of them had elements of competition, and they also had those spooky elements. I thought watching the kids solve the puzzles for the scavenger hunt was so much fun. I think the puzzles were well thought through. Like, it was fun trying to figure them out myself as the kids were trying to figure them out. Like, those would have actually been hard clues for people to try to solve in that scavenger hunt, and I really respect that. I think Wishbone as Ichabod was absolutely perfect. This episode was just wildly entertaining overall. Now, when it comes to the moral message that they were trying to pull out of the work and communicate to the young audience, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow itself doesn't really have any moral messages going on, unless your takeaway is don't pursue pretty Dutch girls who have bad boys after them. Might be some good advice, actually. But I'm glad they didn't try to fabricate any kind of moral message. Instead, they just worked with the spooky vibes and also the theme of bad luck. Joe is convinced that Halloween is bad luck for him. He is very superstitious, and this whole episode, we see him overcoming that. And I think the thing that comes closest to a moral message is something that Joe's mom, Ellen, says to him as she's trying to talk him into going to the scavenger hunt. I actually wrote it down because I wanted to read it to you. We all wonder about our luck from time to time. There's no way you can predict what's going to happen tonight or any other given day. Nobody can. If you expect the worst, though, you just might find it. I'm pretty sure you'll have a lot more fun tonight if you expect the best. And I think that's a really great message for kids, especially ones who would be around the age that they would be watching this show, because I definitely remember learning the lesson that sometimes the attitude, the mindset we bring into something can determine our outcome. And I think kids do this a lot around this age. Like, oh, I have a test today. This day is going to suck at school. Or I don't want to go to that birthday party. Someone who I don't like is going to be invited. So they go into it with a negativity, and they probably won't have fun regardless of what happens because they're sour starting off. And I think it's still true as an adult. Like if you go into something being like, this is going to be awful, then it's probably going to be awful because you're already expecting that. But if you go in expecting the best, or if you go in just neutral, just being ready for what happens, then you're probably going to have a whole lot better of an experience. I think that's a really important lesson for all of us, but the earlier you can learn it, the better. So I think they nailed it with this one, honestly. So yeah. I think this is one of the best episodes, if not the best episode of Wishbone that I have seen and taken on in this series thus far. But if you'd like to see more of these What's the Story Wishbone episodes, if you want to see the good, the bad, the in-between, I will link the playlist for you in the description box below and up in the cards. If you have any comments or questions about anything you've seen in this video or about anything in general, please feel free to leave those in the comment section below. But if you would like to keep up with what I'm reading and writing about right now, you can find me on a variety of places around the internets, including Goodreads and Instagram, the two places that I'm the most active. The links to all of my profiles will be at the bottom of the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Funding for Wishbone provided by annual financial support from PBS viewers like you.